Hello and welcome to Identirati Office Hours. I'm your host, Mike Schwartz, founder of Glue. Today is episode 206. Before we get started, a quick reminder, follow IOH on LinkedIn or YouTube. The topic today is non-fungible Bitcoin, and you may wonder why that's identity related, but we'll get there. And our guest today, as you can see, is David Birch, author, advisor, and commentator on digital financial services. Welcome, David. It's an honor.
Hi, Mike. Thank you so much for inviting me. Really appreciate it.
So normally we do background, but I think people know your background. They probably heard some of your keynotes. If not, they can look you up online. And we're just going to dive right into the topic today, which is based on an article that you wrote. That article is actually listed in the episode notes, and the episode notes are always on this short link, glue.co/IOH- the episode number. This is 206. So you can look up this article. The article was actually titled Back to Fungibility Again. And I was really intrigued by especially one line in this article that we'll get to later. But before we sort of dive into that, maybe you could help just set up the conversation a little bit, because fungible is a big word. And what's the difference between fungible and non-fungible assets?
So what the word means in practice is interchangeability. So the idea is that all dollars are interchangeable. Like if I lend you $10, you don't have to give me the same $10 back. Like any $10 will do. And you're going to argue and say, okay, well, yeah, dollar bills have a serial number on them. Well, they do, but the ATMs don't read them. You can use quarters if you don't want to use dollar bills. But the point is they're all the same. So any obligation can be fulfilled by any of these things. Non-fungible things are all different. And a good simple example that I quite often use in these discussions, because it's easy to think about, is a concert ticket. If you have a ticket to go see Taylor Swift at this location on that night in this seat in that row, that's completely unique. It can't be interchanged with any of the others. So fungible things are a super simplified place to start the argument. Non-fungible things are property, and fungible things are money, broadly speaking. So if I steal your car, for example, and sell it to somebody else, it's still your car. And if you find it, you can get it back. And it's just hard luck on the person that bought it from me. The fact that they bought it from me in good faith and they believed that it was my car, hard luck. It wasn't my car. It's your car. It still belongs to you. You can go and get it back. Money doesn't quite work in the same way. If I steal some of your money and I do something with it, I give it to somebody else, your claim is against me. You know what I mean? Like your claim isn't on the individual dollar bills. It's on the $10,000 that I need to pay you back. You can't go to somebody else and get those. So fungibility is an important concept when it comes to issues around money. And the reason why this turns into a big fight at conferences sometimes is because Bitcoin isn't fungible. Bitcoins are not interchangeable, and they are therefore not money. Bitcoin is an interesting type of property, which in certain circumstances, under certain conditions, can exhibit money-like characteristics, but it's not money. And one of the implications of this, and you probably need to talk to a lawyer about US law. I don't know if it's the same. If I pay you a Bitcoin for something, and then 5 years later, someone comes along and says, hold on a second, that wasn't Dave's Bitcoin, that was actually my Bitcoin. And by the way, here's the blockchain. So I've got this immutable record that shows it was actually mine and it was stolen from me. I want it back. Well, it's property, you have to give it back. And that has implications for final settlement and blah, blah, blah. So in a nutshell, and a very inaccurate précis of complex legal issues, Bitcoin appears like money, but it really isn't.
Okay, yeah, that was a great definition. And, I mentioned that it doesn't immediately jump out to you why we should be having a conversation about money on an identity podcast. But I just, for those in the audience who might not remember, Dave wrote a book called Identity is the New Money.
I did.
And I'm wondering if money has a new identity, might be the converse of that. And also,
It's a good idea for another book in there. Yeah, it's property has owners, and if you can encode ownership in some way, back it up a little bit before we get to that. The reason I was writing that article was to do with, I mean, I could have written this any day of the week, any time this year, because every single day, some DAO somewhere gets hacked, some smart contract goes wrong, someone.
But I particularly like the choice of kelp DAO, which are two words that I never ever would have dreamed could have been connected in some way.
But I could have chosen any number of examples for that sort of thing. But this led me into another connected topic, which is to do with the law. So if things like Bitcoin, which are not fungible, are property, what kind of property are they? So in English law, and I think in US law it's similar, there are currently two kinds of property that exist in the law. There are what's called things in possession, which means physical objects. Your bicycle is a thing in possession, you can hold it. And there are things in action, which are things that only belong to you by virtue of contracts and courts and so on. So, a stock certificate or a company or something like that. It's not a physical thing, it's a legal construct. It belongs to you. And the Law Society in England and Wales began to study this problem a few years ago because they could see something coming down the road which looked a bit different. So, and I would call that, they don't call it this, but I think it's a good name for it, things in wallets. In other words, things where you've got the key for it. And it's an interesting thing. Like, can you shoehorn that into one of these other kinds of property, or actually is it something different? So if you take the view that it's something different, then Bitcoin is property, but it's one of this class of new kinds of property, which will have their own sort of rules around them. And I think that's an interesting topic to explore. If you're going to have property and it's going to work in a marketplace, then it has owners, and the owners have to establish their right over that property before they can trade it and exchange it with other people, blah, blah, blah. And actually, and with Bitcoin, that's quite, like if I send you a Bitcoin, you can go to the blockchain and trace it all the way back, go through all the UXTS. Well, where did this come from? And then, I don't know, you find out I got it from selling blood diamonds, or because I was working for mercenary warlord Mr. Bajorgin or whatever, and you can decide this money is tainted, or it's the result of a crime or something like that, and you don't want it. So not all Bitcoins are the same.
So you must have been scrubbing, or either that or you're so enmeshed in this industry. But so in your article, you write the government of Tasmania, not normally a place known for being on the legal vanguard of like innovation, has actually agreed with you and said that possession of private keys is a new type of property. But what would have to be, they say the states are the laboratories for the federal government in the US. Well, this is a very novel legal idea, after X number of hundreds of years, we're deciding there's a new type of property. What would the journey of this have to be, or what is sort of the conversation that's going to become upcoming about this, you think, in places like the US and Europe?
I have absolutely no idea, Mike. I mean, we need to talk to a lawyer to find that out. I mean, the reason I used that Tasmania example was actually because I was looking at Australia for something else completely, because Australia is interesting to people like me because they have this digital identity framework and they're enacting. I was actually looking at Australia because of that, and stuff to do with mobile driving licenses and federal ID and things like that. And that was how I sort of came across this example, because it relates, like you said, it seems a bit odd, but these things do relate to each other. So if possession of the private keys is a new kind of property, which will have presumably new kinds of court rulings and precedents set around it, that will, in ways that I can't imagine, because I'm not a lawyer, I don't know how that's going to go, But I can sort of see that that would mean you'd have to write new kinds of contracts, and yeah, not that you couldn't do it, but you'd have to write new kinds of contracts. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing too.
One line that I really liked from your article was you wrote fungible assets, for example, dollars, are defined by kind and quality rather than individual identity. And of course, the identity word kind of sort of stuck out to me because normally we project identity onto humans. It's almost hard to get people not to do that, although we do have identities for software and organizations. But what struck me about that line is that it implies that the money itself has an identity. And I don't really know what the implications are for that. Um, are we going to extend identity into also resources, not just the things that take action, but it's a pretty deep change in sort of our thinking.
Yeah, I think we are heading in that direction. And actually, you can see pressure coming from another direction from that as well, because we've spent most of our careers worrying about the identity of people and not fixing that problem. We still haven't fixed that. Hopefully we're getting closer, and
We're good at it now.
but fraud is completely out of control. So in the mass market, we haven't fixed that problem. We have the problem of business identities, which is quite a hot topic at the moment now. So like in my mental model again, you can have like the identity of things that exist, people, and the identity of things that are imaginary, companies. Companies are a legal fiction, but they still need an identity. And now we have an obvious third category, which is AIs, which don't exist in the same way that companies don't exist. They're virtual things that only exist in software, but they have to have an identity. Otherwise, none of this stuff's going to work properly. And at the moment, those identities are kind of inherited from businesses or people. But if you follow that same line of thinking, there's no obvious reason why downstream AIs wouldn't get some form of legal personhood. Companies have legal personhood, trusts have legal personhood. We don't give companies legal personhood because we think they have immortal souls. Companies have legal personhood for economic expediency. It makes the economy work. And you can see the same argument coming for AIs, which is they'll become legal things in their own right, which means they'll have their own legal identities. They will be able to possess Bitcoins or whatever by virtue of possessing the private keys. And then you find yourself in this really interesting new space where you have these kind of legal entities exchanging and trading with each other, this new kind of property. And if you're trying to think strategically, or at least trying to do some scenario, like for most of the people I work for, things are changing far too quickly to try to draw up strategic plans around this kind of thing. So what you end up doing is these 3 to 5 year kind of scenario planning exercises to see what the possible outcomes would be and what's common to them. And I mean, you've done these kind of things before. This is a really interesting set of topics to put into that space. And I guess one of the reasons why I find it so interesting, because I actually don't know what the answer is. I mean, a lot of the things we worked on, you and I, you kind of knew what the answer was. Like okay, you're going to need this key pair, you're going to need this certificate. Like it took us a roundabout route to get anywhere, but we sort of knew where we were going. I mean, on this, I really don't. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so fascinated in it.
It's a multi-generational challenge that's not going to be solved by our generation, and hopefully will be solved by the next generation, but maybe not entirely as we transform to a digital society. You were talking about the identity of software, and one thing I would say is that from someone who's more enmeshed in the industry of federation and how software works, lots of software has identity, and we use asymmetric authentication via keys to authenticate software. And what's interesting to me is that we're saying, okay, humans are actually moving to this type of asymmetric authentication too, because a wallet is basically proof of possession of keys.
Yes.
And also passkeys are also proof of possession of keys. So we're moving humans to this new way. But one interesting sort of connection between this is that software also is identified through attestations. Maybe there's a key enclave on a piece of hardware, and you register your private key to.
Yes, enclave, I think, is a very important word here, Mike, because I didn't know we were going to go down one level down the rabbit hole, but you're absolutely right, because I think for this to work in the mass market, if my OpenClaw is going to have its own identity, that effectively means it's got to have its own private key somewhere. And so where is that? I mean, we don't want that in software because that will be, a catastrophe. So it has to be somewhere in tamper-resistant hardware. And when we're talking about people, that enclave is on your phone, and that kind of works. But if I want my AI to do what people say it's going to do and go buy air tickets for me and stuff like that, I don't want to be woken up at 2:00 in the morning because I put my thumb on my phone so that my AI can access the keys. My AI is going to need access to keys, which effectively is going to mean some form of remote secure elements, HSMs in the cloud, virtual SIMs in hardware. I mean, different options for that. But I think enclave is a good phrase to bring in there because we're going to need those. And working out how those are going to be managed and operated, I think, is also kind of an interesting, apart from anything else, I think it's a new business in its own right, taking care of that for AIs. But
we're busy working on that problem, I would say. It's a big problem.
But that would make your point about wallets really, so the wallet then will become the central organizing principle for all of these things. My wallet would hold, my credentials and, all this kind of stuff. The private keys would all be in secure hardware somewhere. And
although, by the way, it's wallets have a lot of friction, and so passkeys are the more common binding that we'll make to a human. Wallets is registration or enrollment.
Yeah, the circumstances aren't relevant, but I was in a discussion yesterday about whether the route to passkeys for agent, I'm curious what your opinion about this, do we look at some kind of FIDO plus, which AIs can access? Or
no.
do we say downstream AIs are going to need their own, so let's get started on building the right solution for AIs? And that's an interesting discussion.
Yeah, I think just my short answer on that is we already have good credential management for our servers. We have virtual private computing, even at the kernel level now. So we're good at that with software and workloads. But I'd say FIDO is specifically about humans because humans are problematic. And so the shared pass keys and hardware-bound keys, I think this is a good optimization. We have wallets for like high friction, and we have passkeys for low friction. Wallets have claims, passkeys don't. But they both basically do the same thing, which is defeat phishing, which is important. But here's my last question, because we're running out of time. I know you're busy. You have 10 meetings, and
you always make me think, Mike. I really appreciate it.
This is my last question, and I don't know. Actually, how many billions of dollars have been stolen from crypto? There's been more money stolen from crypto than all the bank robberies put together. So with that sort of like healthy dose of cynicism, could you say that despite the billions of stolen crypto, could cryptocurrency still be safer than fiat currency? Because it's impossible to hide the fact that you obtain this tokens from a bad actor like the Lazarus Group. If you see the Lazarus Group in that history, you don't want to buy that.
I don't agree with that argument. And actually, I can point you to another hack from last month, because there was the Orchard pool was hacked in Zcash. And so if you hack a completely private currency, then no one even knows you've stolen it. So it's not a simple yes, no answer. I think what it means in the mass market is actually more towards stable. I hate to sound like a mainstream TradFi, blah, blah, blah. But I think really what this means is stable coins are the starting point. Stable coins are in fact the trigger for laying down the rails for the next generation of financial services. And downstream, we're actually looking at an economy that's based on the exchange of digital assets of one form or another, wallet to wallet kind of stuff. Will cryptocurrency be part of that? It's not clear to me at all. I mean, it could be that somebody is going to invent Bitcoin Plus or Son of Bitcoin. I mean, I think one of the odd things about the Bitcoin people is the Bitcoin maximalists, they think that somehow we've accidentally stumbled on the optimum form of electronic cash, at the first attempt. And I don't know about that. I mean, maybe AIs will invent a better form of Bitcoin tomorrow. I don't know. Maybe that's one of the things they're working on right now. So is cryptocurrency central to that? Not obvious to me. Are stable coins then, generalized digital assets? That, to me, that seems more likely. Yeah.
Interesting. All right, I just want to give you a chance to say any last thoughts, or where can we see you next, maybe?
Well, if TradFi people that want to come and do this, I'll be at Money 2020 in Las Vegas, actually talking about stable coins as it happens. And we'd love to meet people there. And then I'm going to my good friend Simon Taylor's FinTech NerdCon in San Diego, which I'll again be there boring people's senses about stable coins. But in either place, I'm always happy to learn more about anything in this space. So please do come and say hi.
Awesome. Well, thank you, David. It's really been an honor to have you on. This is a great article you wrote. And let me just quickly announce next episode. It's a weird episode. It's book club. This is for real geeks there's a book called The Proof in the Code about the lean programming language. We're going to talk about that next week. A quick reminder, follow IOH on LinkedIn and YouTube. That really helps us. We're trying to get to 3,000 followers. You too, Dave. Don't forget to follow. And with that, Dave, thank you for being on. It was great seeing you.
Thanks, Mike.